Lake George Battlefield Moments, a production of Lake George Battlefield Park Alliance, preserving our area's incredible history. Here's local historian Dr. Bruce Venter.
Hello, everyone. This is Bruce Venter, and welcome to Lake George Battlefield Moments, brought to you by Lake George Battlefield Alliance and Lake George Radio. I am a trustee on the Alliance board. On our last episode, we had Dr. Matt Keagle, the curator of Fort Ticonderoga, talk about the reenactment of Henry Knox bringing the cannon from the fort over to Boston and how that was going to be accomplished. But I understand that there's going to be other events in 2026, and we'd like Matt to explain that to us. Matt, thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Bruce. It's good to be with you.
As part of Fort Ticonderoga's real-time revolution, the folks at the fort are recreating Henry Knox's part in bringing the cannon from Fort Ticonderoga all the way over to Boston for George Washington. And they've got quite a reenactment planned for the first weekend in December. Matt, could you elaborate on that for us?
Certainly. So we have a really exciting schedule of events for early December 5th through 7th, when we are going to be exploring the context and the history and commemorating Henry Knox's arrival at Ticonderoga. So this is beginning on December 5th. We have a premium experience called Ticonderoga's Treasures. It's a Henry Knox edition of this. And so folks can sign up. They can get tickets online, or they're able to join remotely. If they can, stream in, they can get tickets there. And what we're going to be doing is pulling out from our collection some original manuscripts written by Benedict Arnold, Philip Schuyler, Horatio Gates, and Henry Knox that give context to the expedition to get cannon from Ticonderoga. The impetus of these expeditions early in 1775 up through Henry Knox's actual arrival here at Ticonderoga and the work that he is doing. That's also going to look at Henry Knox as kind of a polymath, someone who really educated himself in military affairs with no formal education, which he did through reading books. And we're fortunate that he writes in a letter to John Adams in response to a query about what should American officers be reading as our revolution begins, because of course we have no army. And Knox responds, and he lays out in effect a kind of syllabus for John Adams of military books. We have copies of all the books that Knox recommended in our library of rare books, and we're going to be bringing out some of those to actually show you some of the knowledge that Knox felt was important to American officers. And beyond that, we have a couple pieces of artillery as part of our broad collection of artillery here at Ticonderoga that relate to Knox's expedition and the repercussions of that expedition, including one half of an iron mortar, which is possibly the only survivor of Knox's expedition over the winter of 1775 into 1776. And if that weren't enough, that's just this one afternoon program all day on December 6th, which was the first full day that Knox was here at Ticonderoga historically. Our living history program, as part of our real-time revolution experience, will be portraying the beginning of Henry Knox's expedition. So we'll have soldiers portraying the New Yorkers that were in the garrison here, that under Philip Schuyler's orders were implementing the predetermination of which guns are going to go to Boston. They're going to be using historic tools, massive gun gins to hoist cannon barrels off their carriages, mount them on wagons and carts and sleds with ox teams and horses, and begin the movement of those guns. So you'll actually be able to see quite literally the heavy lifting that the Continental soldiers did here at Ticonderoga to get the guns that Knox selected on their way to Boston, as well as testing out some of those guns, scaling some of the iron guns, which is something that they did to basically blast off any of the rust on the inside of those weapons, and, more generally get a glimpse into the experience of what Ticonderoga was like when Henry Knox arrived. And that being really the beginning of the broader commemoration of Henry Knox's expedition will continue on to Sunday, when the guns and vehicles, draft animals will have multiple teams of oxen here. Multiple reproduction cannon are going to be starting this journey. And we will travel through, in a parade almost, through the town of Ticonderoga on Sunday, December 7th. Bringing those guns along, following the first leg of their journey from Fort Ticonderoga through the town today of Ticonderoga, over the portage and up towards the northern landing at Lake George, which is where they were historically transferred to boats to continue the journey southwards. So we'll be kicking off, again, this broader commemoration that, of course, from here will expand across New York and Massachusetts and ultimately wind its way down in Dorchester, outside of Boston, in March.
What was additionally on those sleds that would help out George Washington as he laid siege to the British Army that was cooped up in Boston?
That's a wonderful question. And the cannon that are here are a combination of origins, but effectively they were all left over from the French and Indian War. A lot of the guns that were captured were French, and they had been abandoned by the French army, both at Ticonderoga and at Crown Point, as they evacuated those forts in 1759. Additional artillery had been brought north by the British army that they were seeking to use in the reduction of Canada, which was ultimately accomplished in 1760. And I often liken this to the end of almost any conflict, especially long-range foreign wars. The last thing a government wants to do is to pay to send bulky, expensive military equipment back from these distant theaters of war home. And so as a consequence, when these conflicts end, the guns that were captured there, that were moved there during the conflict, largely just stay there. And that's one of the reasons there is this volume of artillery that's there that doesn't see a lot of upgrades or changes between the French and Indian War and the Revolution, because there's really no need for that amount of artillery during that period of peacetime between the two conflicts. But it means that there is a significant volume of artillery in this interior post that's relatively lightly guarded, unlike you would find almost anywhere else in America at this time.
Matt, this is all very interesting information, and I think that our listeners would really appreciate knowing more. How would we go about finding out about the events for 2026 that you are going to recreate as part of our nation's 250th anniversary?
Oh, certainly. Well, the best way is to go to our website, fortticonderoga.org. If you follow that, you'll see a button or a tab for Learn and Explore, with a button below that for Ticonderoga 250th. And one of the tiles is on Henry Knox's noble train of artillery. And there's a page there that has information about all the programming we're doing, all the digital content you can access online, videos, historic documents that are available on our online database, our collection of cannon and other material. And they can also get tickets for our Friday Ticonderoga's Treasures Knox experience, or our Noble Train Begins event on Saturday, December 6th.
Well, thanks a lot, Matt, for being with us. Anyone who wants to know more can go to our YouTube channel and go to Lake George Battlefield Moments. There's a lot of good historical information on there from top name historians that we've been interviewing over the course of the last year or so.
Lake George Battlefield Moments, a production of Lake George Battlefield Park Alliance, preserving our area's incredible history. For more information or to check out the latest podcast, go to lakegeorgebattlefield.org and listen live on Saturday mornings to Lake George Battlefield Moments on 93.5 Lake FM.